Formula One has always lived on the edge of what humans and machines can survive. It's sold as glamour, innovation, and speed, but behind the polished carbon fiber and champagne is a darker truth. For much of its history, the sport asked drivers to race at the absolute limit with safety that often lagged years behind the technology. And every so often, a single moment would freeze the entire paddock. An impact, a fireball, a silence on the radio, followed by the same haunting question: how did we let it get to this? Because the deadliest accidents in Formula One aren't just tragedies. They are turning points. They rewrite rulebooks, change tracks forever, and leave scars on everyone who watched: fans, mechanics, rivals, and families alike. This is not a celebration of danger. It's a look at the moments that forced Formula One to confront its own cost, and how survival in modern F1 was built on lessons written in the hardest way imaginable. To understand why these accidents mattered so much, you have to understand the world they happened in. In the early decades of Formula One, safety barriers were often little more than metal guardrails or trees. Runoff areas didn't exist in the modern sense. Medical response was inconsistent. Cars used fuel tanks that could rupture, and drivers were sometimes trapped in burning wreckage with almost no time to escape. Even as the sport professionalized, the danger remained, just at higher speeds. And the most chilling part is that many of these incidents didn't come from recklessness alone. Some came from mechanical failure, poor visibility, weather, track design, or split-second chain reactions that no one could fully control. That's what makes them terrifying. They remind you that in a sport decided by milliseconds, tragedy can arrive just as fast. One of the darkest weekends in Formula One history arrived in 1994 at Imola during the San Marino Grand Prix. By that point, Formula One had already lost drivers in previous eras, but the modern world believed the sport was improving. Then, in qualifying, Roland Ratzenberger suffered a fatal crash. He was a rookie in F1, still building his career, and in a single instant, everything stopped. The paddock was stunned, not just because of the loss, but because it felt like a warning the sport didn't want to hear. The next day, that warning became a nightmare when Ayrton Senna, one of the greatest drivers the sport has ever known, crashed during the race and later died from his injuries. The impact on Formula One was immediate and permanent. The deaths of Ratzenberger and Senna didn't just shock the world, they triggered a wave of safety reform that reshaped modern F1. Stronger crash structures, better cockpit protection, improved medical response, stricter track standards, and a relentless focus on preventing the kind of catastrophic failures that had suddenly returned to the sport's center stage. When people talk about F1 safety, they are talking about a timeline that has a scar burned into it. Imola, 1994. Yet Formula One's deadliest incidents aren't limited to one weekend. In 2014, the sport suffered another tragedy that changed its future. Jules Bianchi. Racing in difficult wet conditions at the Japanese Grand Prix, Bianchi crashed and made contact with a recovery vehicle that was attending another incident. He later died from his injuries, and the shock cut deep because this was the modern era, an era that believed the worst was behind it. Bianchi's accident forced Formula One to confront a painful reality. Even with improved car safety, the environment around the car, marshals, recovery vehicles, visibility, and race control decisions could still create lethal risks. In the years that followed, the sport accelerated changes in how it manages yellow flags, recovery operations, and driver speed in hazardous conditions. Systems like the virtual safety car became part of the sport's safety toolbox, and the conversation around decision-making in extreme weather became far more serious. Bianchi's legacy is a reminder that safety is not only engineering, it's judgment, procedure, and discipline under pressure. Long before carbon fiber survival cells and advanced medical cars, Formula One endured tragedies that shaped its identity. In 1961, Wolfgang von Trips was involved in a crash at the Italian Grand Prix at Monza that resulted not only in his death, but also the deaths of spectators, an unbearable outcome that reflected how close fans and danger once were. The track layouts of the era, the barriers, the runoff, by modern standards, they were almost non-existent. That accident remains one of the most devastating in the sport's history because it underscores a truth people forget when they romanticize the old days. Early Formula One often treated risk as the price of entry for drivers and sometimes for the people watching. The sport would eventually move towards safer circuits and better crowd protection, but those changes were slow, and they came after irreversible losses. In 1970, tragedy struck again when Jochen Rindt died after a crash in practice for the Italian Grand Prix. What makes Rindt's story especially haunting is that he went on to become Formula One's only posthumous world champion. It's one of the most unsettling facts in racing history, a title awarded not to a triumphant driver on a podium, but to a name spoken in grief. Rindt's death pushed the sport further toward improvements in safety standards, especially around track barriers and car design, at a time when speeds were rising and circuits were still dangerously unforgiving. If there is a crash that symbolizes the brutal violence of the 1970s, it's Niki Lauda's near-fatal accident at the Nürburgring in 1976. Lauda survived, but the crash is remembered with the same gravity as the deadliest incidents because it exposed how helpless even the best drivers could be at the most dangerous circuits. The Nürburgring was long, complex, and difficult to marshal quickly. Lauda's car caught fire, and his survival depended on the courage and speed of others who stopped to help. The aftermath became a defining chapter in the push to remove or drastically change circuits that could not meet modern safety and medical response demands. Lauda's return, shockingly fast given the severity of his injuries, became legendary, but the larger story is what the crash revealed. Formula One could no longer pretend that tradition mattered more than survival. Some of the most heartbreaking accidents in F1 history involved not just drivers, but the people around them. In 1982, Gilles Villeneuve suffered a fatal crash during qualifying at the Belgian Grand Prix. Villeneuve was beloved for his fearless style and raw speed, and his loss shook the sport emotionally. The same year, tragedy returned when Riccardo Paletti died after a start line collision at the Canadian Grand Prix. These incidents reinforced how dangerous even the beginning moments of a race could be: packed grids, limited visibility, and cars accelerating into chaos. Over time, the sport responded with improved start procedures, better medical response, and continuous refinement of car structures to manage impacts that once instantly turned fatal. Then there are accidents that didn't always end a life, but still changed Formula One forever because they proved how close death remained. In the modern era, one of the most terrifying examples is Romain Grosjean's crash at the 2020 Bahrain Grand Prix. The car struck a barrier and erupted into flames, splitting apart in a way that made the situation look impossible to survive. Yet Grosjean escaped. That outcome wasn't luck alone. It was the result of decades of safety evolution. The strength of the survival cell, improved fuel systems, fireproof gear, rapid medical response, and crucially, the controversial device that many once hated, the halo. Grosjean's survival became one of the strongest arguments ever made for modern cockpit protection. It didn't erase the danger, but it proved that Formula One could still face the worst-case scenario and bring a driver home alive. Another modern crash that highlighted the halo's value came at the 2022 British Grand Prix, when Zhou Guanyu was flipped and slid upside down before ending up in the barriers. Again, the imagery was terrifying. An F1 car moving like a helpless object across the asphalt. Again, the driver survived. These moments matter because they reveal something crucial. Formula One has not eliminated extreme accidents. It has changed what those accidents mean. In the past, incidents like these often ended in funerals. Today, they can end in medical checks and shaken interviews, because the sport finally began building cars around a single priority: the survival of the person inside. Not every deadly moment in the world of Formula racing happened in an F1 Grand Prix, but the broader ecosystem has still shaped the sport's safety mindset. The death of Antoine Hubert in a 2019 Formula 2 crash at Spa-Francorchamps deeply affected the entire motorsport community, including Formula 1. It reinforced how dangerous high-speed corners and secondary impacts can be, even with modern safety structures. The response across motorsport has been to study barriers, car compatibility in crashes, cockpit protection, and medical response with even greater urgency. F1 does not exist in isolation. When tragedy hits in its feeder series, the shockwave still reaches the pinnacle. And if there is one theme running through every deadly chapter of Formula One history, it's this: after each tragedy, the sport changes, sometimes immediately, sometimes painfully slowly, but always in a way that acknowledges what was lost. Tracks were redesigned, chicanes added, barriers improved, medical standards strengthened, cockpit protection transformed, fire safety upgraded, and race control procedures rewritten. Yet the sport remains dangerous by nature because it is built on speed. The difference today is that Formula One no longer treats danger as unavoidable fate. It treats it as an engineering problem and a management responsibility, something that must be reduced, controlled, and never ignored, even when the spectacle tempts people to look away. So when we talk about the deadliest accidents in Formula One history, we are not just listing tragedies. We are describing the moments that forced the sport to grow up, the moments that proved fame and talent cannot defeat physics, the moments that reminded every driver that the line between glory and catastrophe is not a metaphor, it is a fraction of a second. And if modern Formula One feels safer, it's because the sport remembers. Because behind every new safety feature is an old story the paddock never wants to repeat. And the most haunting part of all is this: Formula One will always chase speed. The question is whether it can keep chasing it without paying the same price again.